All right, everyone. If you are an avid podcast listener, you will recognize Jennifer Arthurton, who was on earlier this year talking about her amazing body of work, Old Chicks No Shit, which you know I am here for. And it sounds like Jennifer and I were catching up before I hit the record. Many of you really dug it. A lot of you reached out to her. So I'm always overjoyed to hear that from our guests. So Jennifer is someone who's been doing the Wild Soul Movement work since 2014, since it first came out. She's been to 2 workshops with me. She did teacher training this year. So she is a real thorough Wild Soul mover. And, I've been asking people some similar questions, but I want to hone in with you on, in Wild Soul Movement, the topic of trust was big for you. Mm-hmm. And I'm really curious. I know you've done a lot of other work. You read a lot of books. You listen to podcasts. You're no stranger to personal development work. So what I'm really curious about is how the embodiment aspect, the movement practice of Wild Soul Movement really helped you to anchor in the trust.
Okay. It's interesting. So when I started Wild Soul Movement, if you'd asked me if there was a trust issue in there anywhere, I would have said, yeah, I'm good. I trust. First time I did that section of it, I actually couldn't even finish it because there were so many tears. I was literally in a ball on the floor, sobbing my eyes out. As much as I intellectually, and I'm a person who lives very much in their head, intellectually couldn't wrap my head around where I was not trusting, my body knew it. And so every time I went into that practice, and especially I noticed when I did it in workshop with other people versus on my own, I would have a physical reaction to it. So the interesting part is I still can't even, I know now that, yes, I had trust issues with myself. Yes, I had, trust issues, let's say, in terms of, my life, in terms of spirituality and things like that. But I can't even quite articulate it for you, what it was like on an intellectual level. So at some point I just trusted and let whatever needed to come out, come up. And so the movement, I would never have gotten to that place had I not done the movement. And I have to say, I was, as much as I love you and I love the program, I was very resistant to the movement at the beginning, incredibly resistant to the movement at the beginning. But it probably was it was the key to opening up things that I didn't even know existed.
And I've said this, you've heard me say this in various contexts, but I say, hate me now, love me later, right? Blame me for your resistance. It's fine. But later on, when you trust in yourselves, you're like, oh man, goodness. I love that.
And then and even doing the teacher training too, that was a whole other level of depth that we went to in that was, again, I was like, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm over this trust thing. I got it. I'm like, yeah, no. So I honestly think it's constant evolution.
And that's come up. It's been, I know this to be true. And I've watched over 1,000 women go through the online program, hundreds of women come through workshops and retreats over the years. But to hear you all say it over and over again, that the body and the mind tell very different stories. And the truth is in the body.
Oh, yeah.
The deep truth is in the body.
Absolutely.
In what ways do you notice you're different? Just in terms of how you move through the world, but also how you treat yourself after Wild Soul Movement?
Well, the one thing for sure is being tuned into my body. Which before, and I think I said this on the podcast, was this blob that's happening beneath my neck. Now I recognize the signs and signals of when she's talking to me. That feeling, that's not a burp, that's not gas. That's hello, there's a message there for you. So just even being able to recognize that incredibly powerful. And like you said, the body knows much more so than the mind does. And so being able to tune into that and just knowing when things are coming up, that I also can trust it. Like, again, trust comes into it, like this feeling. And it's like, okay, I know I can trust that there's something there that I need to explore. It's definitely given me a level of compassion with myself that I didn't have before. So being very mind driven, very, in my head a lot, there was a lot of before, you should have, you could have, why didn't you, this needs to be done. Whereas now there's a lot more to say, oh yeah, now I can recognize the difference between, okay, my mind is saying this is a should, but really, is it a should? Like, what's that being driven by? Is that coming from inside me, or is that coming from some external source? And being able to recognize the difference between those two is huge.
Yeah.
And it just allows you to have a lot more, or me to have a lot more compassion and trust in myself. Like, trust, like I can't even explain how powerful I feel knowing that I can trust myself.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
That's why I renamed the online program Power.
Yeah.
Because it's the whole friggin' point of the thing.
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you specifically on, if there is, I don't want to presume, but I think there is, because I feel like we have talked about this, how the Wild Soul Movement practice has impacted your creativity. Because you went from working a corporate job as a marketing professional, executive, to you created a brand, you're a social media presence now, you're working on a friggin' book, you're creating a mentorship program. You are a creative now.
Who'd have thunk it? That's so interesting because one thing that I didn't know was missing from my life was a creative outlet. And a lot of that, I would never have said, actually, I'm just kind of having a bit of a realization. Don't think I would have made the connection between Wild Soul Movement and creativity. Although I will say being in touch with what's in my body or what's going on in my body has sparked the creative juices, has given me more of a creative outlet. So I guess when being bound in your head, it's very, well, I guess it's the masculine, right? And getting in touch with the feminine side within my body is what basically has allowed me to be creative. Like, if you told me I was a writer before this, I would have been like, okay, I can write a presentation, I can write a report.
Yeah.
I'm actually a writer.
It's funny as you're saying this, because I know you and we've worked together for so long, there's another aspect. You're going to laugh when I say it. Control.
Hello. Yes. Okay.
Before we hit record on this, Jennifer was saying that, in terms of the book and some other creative things she's working on, she's kind of just like simmering in it and waiting for it to like fully form. You never would have done that shit before.
Amen.
You needed to know all the steps.
Yeah, that. See, it's become so commonplace for me now that I don't even recognize that I'm doing it.
I love that. Surrender is second nature. Who would have thunk that?
Who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk it?
I love that.
But again, and like we talked about this before, but surrender, like that in itself. But you can't have surrender without trust, like, or full surrender without trust.
Yes, they really go together.
Yeah. And just surrendering to what is has been, it's been a blessing.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Oh, and you know what? At various points when you were doing Wild Soul Movement, I know you've had some health issues. I know you've had some physical, I don't know if you were injured. I don't remember where or what it was, some fatigue stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm curious for anyone listening who thinks that they need to be like super healthy and able-bodied to do Wild Soul Movement. Can you just speak to your experience of why that may not necessarily be the case for some folks?
So for me, coming from a very high intensity fitness background, that was the thing that I love to do. I'm like a heavy weightlifter and a sprinter. Going into wild soul movement was very, very different for me as a type of movement that I hadn't done before and didn't realize how much my body was craving. And so even though I was experiencing like some severe fatigue and adrenal issues and all of that, it was actually a form of movement that was very nurturing. And I mean, if nothing else, wild soul movement is teaching you to listen to your body, to tune into your body. And so, you know, being able to do that, that was actually a huge part of my healing, was learning to trust my body, that my body knew what to do. Right? That it knew what it needed. But again, you know, coming from a world where in your head and, oh, do this and do that, doesn't matter what the body's telling you. Right? So if nothing else, it was actually a good way for me to learn my body's cues and responses to things in a very, very gentle and compassionate way.
And not to override, right?
Yeah.
Which
not to override.
Keep going.
Yeah. I mean, God, I still have tendencies to do that, but now it comes back to, okay, the final say is not up here, it's down here.
Yeah. And for anyone listening, not watching, when she said up here, she pointed to her head. When she said down here, she pointed to her body. So you're amazing. You know I love you. Thank you so much for the time, for the work, for your inspiration. I love that people are digging you on the podcast. If you are listening to this and you want to check out Jennifer's podcast episode, we'll put a link in the show notes, and we